Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about the York Antwerp rules 1994, 2004 and 2016. Now the question before us is, how do we actually know what all sacrifices and expenditures qualify to be averaged and shared in General Average Act? Now, before we go into answering this question or discussing about this question, let me first give you a brief introduction and evolution of the York Antwerp rules. York Antwerp rules are a set of maritime guidelines or regulations to make us understand what all sacrifices and expenditures can be included in calculating general average and what should not be included in calculating general average. Now, let's look into the evolution of York Antwerp rules. These rules were first introduced in an international conference held at York, Great Britain in 1864. The first version of the York Antwerp rules was issued in 1890 and it was amended several times. In 1924, letter rules were incorporated in the York Antwerp rules and they remained unaltered, but there was a significant change in the numbered rules 1974. The rules of 1994 got much recognition, but later the rules were amended in 2004 and 2016. As I told you, York Antwerp rules are a codification of a principle called the law of general average. It was first established in 1890 and then amended several times. These rules outlines the rights and obligations of both the ship and cargo owners in case the cargo is jettisoned in order to save a ship, and generally bill of lading, contracts of affreightment, and marine insurance policies all include the York Antwerp rules. York Antwerp rules, they have three clear principles, and all of them must be met in order for the rules to be applied. The first principle is danger to the ship must be imminent. The second principle is voluntary jettison of a portion of the ship's cargo in order to save the whole. And the third principle is the attempt to avoid the danger must be successful. Now, these three principles must be met for the York Antwerp rules to be applied. Now, what is the objective of these rules? The objective of these rules was to promote international uniformity in dealing with general average. Now, York Antwerp rules has two sections. First section has rules that are identified by the letters, such as Rule A, Rule B, etc. These rules are known as lettered rules, and these rules start from Rule A and goes until Rule G. Now, these lettered rules gives guidelines on what can be included in general average. The second section has rules that are identified by numbers. These rules start from Rule 1, Rule 2, etc. and they are known as the numbered rules. There are about 23 numbered rules. These rules gives the specific situation, sacrifices, and expenditures that can be included in the general average. Now, the third section deals with the paramount rule. While all the rules in York-Antwerp rules are named either with a number or an alphabet, this one rule is named differently. This is because this rule is paramount to all other rules. Now, what is this paramount rule? The rule paramount states that in no case shall there be any allowance for sacrifice or expenditure unless reasonably made. That means the sacrifices should be reasonable. The sacrifices made by the ship owner should be reasonable and they cannot overspend. For example, if a vessel was towed when its engine was working, would not be considered as reasonable and hence would not be included in the general average. York-Antwerp rules are legally binding as it governs general average cases and cannot come into force unless and until it is incorporated in contract of carriage such as bill of lading, charter party agreements, etc. Now here we have three parts: part A, part B, and part C. Part A is the rule of interpretation and rule of paramount. Part B, it is the lettered rules. There are 7 lettered rules from A to G, which are the general rules. And part C, they are the numbered rules. There are about 23 numbered rules from rule 1 to rule 23, and they determine the calculation of the general average. Now let's look at part A, rule of interpretation. The York-Antwerp rules shall apply to the exclusion of any law and practice provided by the rule paramount and the numbered rules. General average shall be adjusted according to the lettered rules. Now, rule A, under the lettered rules of the York-Antwerp rules, it states that there is a general average act when and only when any extraordinary sacrifice or expenditure is intentionally and reasonably made or incurred for the common safety, for the purpose of preserving from peril the property involved in a common maritime adventure. Now, in my last lecture, you would have observed that all the 4 essential elements of general average has been drawn from the rule A, lettered rules of the York-Antwerp rules. What are those 4 essential elements of general average? One is the expenditure or sacrifice needs to be extraordinary. Secondly, that sacrifice or expenditure should be intentional and with the consent of the master of the vessel. Third element, the action must be for the common safety of the voyage. And the fourth element is they must be a peril. So, all the four essential elements of general average has been drawn from Rule A of the lettered rules of York-Antwerp rules. Now let's see what does Rule B of the York-Antwerp rule states. When one or more vessels are towing or pushing another vessel or vessels, the condition which applies is these vessels must not be involved in a salvage operation. Now, what does Rule C state here? Rule C states only such losses, damages, or expenses which are the direct consequences of the General Average Act shall be allowed as general average. No general average for environmental pollution shall be allowed. Cost involved in handling environmental pollution cannot be included in general average. And the owner cannot ask for general average in case of his indirect losses. That means if the owner suffers any indirect loss, he cannot claim or he cannot ask for general average. Now, what does Rule D tells us? It tells us that it does not matter whose fault it is. Let us say the vessel ran aground. The vessel had to sacrifice some of the cargo to refloat it. As per Rule D, the cargo owners cannot claim that the grounding was due to the fault of the ship owner and they would not contribute to general average. Irrespective of the fault which led to the event, all parties have to contribute to the general average. Now, Rule E, it talks about the burden of proof. Burden of proof is upon the party claiming the general average. Rule E also talks about the procedure to be followed by the average adjuster, and the average adjuster is the person who makes all the claims. He is the person who calculates what each party in the voyage should contribute for the loss suffered or for the sacrifice that has been done. Now let's see what Rule F tells us. It tells us that certain expenses that comes under general average can be substituted by another expense which may not come under general average, provided that the money spent for general average may be same or may be even lesser. And finally, Rule G, it talks about the loss or contributions for a general average shall be based on the value of the goods at the time and place when the common maritime adventure ends. Now, these York-Antwerp rules in most of the countries do not have any legal force in themselves. The York-Antwerp rules and the principles of general average have legal force if and only they are included in the bill of lading or charter party agreement. Now here we have the numbered rules, that is Rule 1 to Rule 23. I have shared with you on the Google Classroom a comparison chart of the York-Antwerp rules consisting of the numbered rules and the lettered rules of 1994, 2004 and 2016. go through them and we will discuss in our next lecture. Thank you very much.